Well, let's dive into another big topic here, the Payroll Protection Program loans. This is one that's getting a lot of press, so everyone should be familiar, at least at the high level, with what it is. But we're talking about a really big program here. Um, Give us a definition of what this program is, Gary.
Well, the Payroll Protection Program loans, as you say, have been all over the news. And as of this morning, I heard that there's $25 million left in what was allocated for this program. 1.5 million loans have already been approved by the SBA. And so our Congress is back in debate as to what to do next. They've assured small business owners that they would provide the necessary funds to make sure everybody is covered. But in the same breath, they talked about, well, we've calculated the total number of small businesses and the payrolls and the $349 billion that were allocated to begin with should be enough. Well, it's not. In 2 weeks, they've approved $325 billion worth of loans. So we'll see what comes up next. But basically, the program itself is economic stimulus to incent employers to do everything they can to retain employees.
Sure.
During these tough times.
Yeah. No. As an employee, I certainly appreciate every effort to do that. What employers are eligible to participate in this?
Yeah, all employers with fewer than 500 employees.
Okay.
So small businesses, nonprofits, Native American ventures. It does not include governmentals, to my understanding. Okay. But any commercial or nonprofit entity.
Okay.
And then there's an additional group. The SBA defines certain industries as qualifying as small businesses based on something other than the employee count of the 500 employees. So look at their regulations and see if you qualify in that area. And then they've also added the fact that certain self-employed and contract laborers can apply for these loans themselves as well.
Keep themselves employed, absolutely.
Right. Few exceptions, of course, always exceptions. Employers are not eligible if they've been involved in previous default on an SBA loan. Businesses with owners who are incarcerated and own at least 20% of the business are not eligible. And then there's a pretty short list of businesses that are not considered above board, that are not eligible, such as gambling, sexually oriented, marijuana businesses have been specifically exempted. So make sure you look at those as well.
Sure. Yep, you need to be taking a close look at if your employer is qualifying on that. That's for sure. You kind of listed the amount at the top of this of the total program, but specific for a business, what is the loan amount that's available?
Basically, the loan amount is based on your average monthly payroll costs, and defining the payroll costs being the gross payroll plus your medical and pension benefits and any state taxes that are against the wages.
Okay.
Total those up, come up with an average, generally either 12 months prior to the loan application or for the year of 2019, whichever your bank, generally the banks would tell you what they would prefer you do. And you take that monthly average, multiply it by 2.5, and that's the amount of the loan that you can apply for. There is a $2 million cap on that loan request.
Wow. How does a business apply?
So the applications are going to go through your local bank if they're an SBA lending institution. Right now, I think I've heard that 4,500 banks across the country have submitted loan requests for their customers. Uh, One interesting thing is that due to the overwhelming volume, many banks are limiting their applications to their current customers.
Sure.
They want to take care of them first. So there's been some struggle with some, smaller businesses that don't have a relationship with an SBA lending institution. And so they're kind of scrambling, trying to figure out how they can apply for the loans.
Gary hasn't quite driven this home yet, but he's going to. And for everyone listening, make those appointments. This program is very, very high demand. So if you haven't already had this discussion, it's time to take a very serious look. And this next part may help you because we're going to be talking about loan forgiveness. What are the loan terms?
Well, the loan may be forgiven, and that's, of course, the big draw here. The loan, if it's not forgiven, just the basic terms of the loan is for 2 years. The interest rate is 1%,
Okay.
and there are no payments for 6 months. So they're going to defer the payments themselves. The interest still runs, but the payments are deferred. There are no fees paid by the employer.
Okay.
The SBA is paying the bank the fees in addition to the loan itself. There's no collateral or personal guarantees required. And there are a few statements that you need to affirm and state that you're following the rules, that you're going to use the funds for appropriate purposes, that
Sure.
type of thing. And the deadline for application for this is June 30th. So that time frame will run out fairly soon.
Okay. We talked about forgiveness. You mentioned how folks are getting it, the process of that, but what do they need to be doing with this loan to ensure that they're eligible for this?
Right. And there are a couple of differences between figuring out how much you can borrow versus how much is forgiven. So make sure you're real clear on those areas. But you do have to request forgiveness from your bank. 30 days, let me back up just a minute. Once you receive the loan funds, you have 8 weeks in order to spend them on eligible expenses. And those eligible expenses are for payroll, the benefits that are associated with the payroll, those medical health plans, pension plans, and the state taxes that we talked about earlier. But in addition, you can spend the funds on mortgage interest, not the principal, but the interest, rent, and utilities, as well as interest on other loans that you had prior to February 15th of this year. If you spend the funds on those items and you prove that to your banker, then you should get loan forgiveness. Now, one other requirement is that you have to spend at least 75% of those funds on payroll costs. In that situation, the loan forgiveness might be reduced from the 100%.
Sure.
If you can't spend it all on the 75 or the 75% on payroll. Likewise, again, this is an incentive to keep your employees. So there are 2 other areas where reductions may occur. You have to state how many full-time equivalent employees you have, either based on your February 15th payroll or an average of last year's payroll. And if you reduce the number of FTEs during the 8-week pay period, assessment period, if you will, then that will reduce the amount of forgiveness that you can receive.
Okay.
Now, there's a clause that says that you can restore the number of FTEs by June 30th. How they're going to assess that, I'm not sure yet. The second area where it could be reduced is that if you reduce the rate of pay for an employee beyond greater than 25%, then that's going to reduce the forgiveness as well.
Sure. We're essentially looking at a loan that is built to preserve business as usual as far as the pay and current headcount and those employed.
Right.
And
And
thus,
one twist that not many people are talking about, but which I've noticed one or two mention, is that while you may not get forgiveness for 100% of the loan, you do still need to spend the funds on the eligible items. So if it takes you 10 or 12 weeks to spend those funds, they still need to be spent on eligible items, payroll
okay,
costs, rent, utilities, mortgage interest, that type of thing.
okay. So then what do I need to do now as a business?
I need to get with your banker if you haven't done this already. And the assumption is that most people have done this, but
Hmm.
I know many people get too busy. They think, well, I probably don't qualify for that, and so they just haven't paid attention to this point. But they need to get with their banker. I'd go ahead and assume that Congress is going to provide additional funds, and make sure you get your applications in. It's a 2-page SBA application, pretty simple. You will need to provide documentation to the bank as to how you calculated your payroll costs. And in some aspects, your banker really controls what is going to be required, because
Sure.
the documentation, the regulations are pretty scarce. So the banker has to kind of use their own interpretation, and then wait for approval. I'm seeing generally a week or so. If you think about the fact that this just started a week ago Monday, or a week ago Friday, it's been a pretty rapid burn rate as far as the funds that are available.
That's incredible. So no time to waste on this one then, folks. There's a lot more to cover here, everyone, and I know we're getting back to the top of the hour, so I'm going to put these on the screen. And Gary, I'd love it if you could just let us know some of these that are really impactful, any high-level notes you have on any of this that our folks on the phone should be aware of.
Okay. And one other item that I forgot to mention: you will need to be prepared to prove what you spent on those PPP loan funds.
Sure.
The banker will need to decide exactly whether or not you spent those funds accordingly. So they will be requesting. I don't know exactly what they're going to request at this point. Each bank may be a little different, but you will need to track how you spend those funds. Other provisions, we kind of push these down a little bit just because they're not as immediate in their requirements. But the SBA has a long-running program of economic injury disaster loans. Anytime there's a disaster like a hurricane, tornadoes, floods, and that type of thing, they've got the structure for loans to help recover. They've applied it here against economic injury, and have made a whole new class, or are using this class in order to provide working capital assistance. It's pretty standard processes that they've done in the past. It does have more of the requirements for collateral guarantees,
Sure.
and that type of thing. One twist is that they do have an almost immediate advance of $10,000 that you can apply for. If you apply for the loan, you get the $10,000 advance. They have changed it a little bit in that they're generally going to look at how many employees you have, and they'll allow $1,000 per employee. But again, this $10,000, whether you qualify for the loan or not, does not have to be repaid. It will be wrapped into the PPP loan if you apply for that. So they don't want you double dipping for the same expenses. But these loans are pretty good loans.
Sure.
Probably better terms than normal working capital loans, the fixed interest rate of 3.75%. And you don't apply for a specific amount. You tell the SBA what your expenses are. They determine how much you qualify for, and they set the terms as far as payback. It can be up to 30 years, but they're going to determine how long they're going to allow. And this is applied for through the SBA. Looks like our time's just about run out. So
Sure. Hey, so let's take a quick note here. I want to let everyone know we'll put contact information on here. If there's any of those that you'd like further information on, I'll go ahead and get the screen prepped up for you, Gary. In summary, closing notes, what are your thoughts here?
I think everybody just needs to be aware that while there are some great benefits available, you really need to be looking at your particular situation, and you need to be planning ahead. Nobody knows how long this is going to last. Nobody knows how long it's going to take for the economy to really rev back up. And everybody's speculating from, our president is hopeful that it's pretty immediately. There are pundits who say this could be worse than the 2008 recession. And some have even called the depression. But nobody really knows. So be looking at your particular situation. A lot of things have changed. Will your customers expect different things once this ends? Will they continue to want remote assistance? Will they continue to want to place orders online and do pickup or delivery and those types of things? People may get used to some things that they were forced into, but decide, this isn't all bad. Let's continue this. So, just look at your situation. Are there alternative services, alternative products that you may be able to sell to your customers going forward? Be proactive about, how do I survive this, number one, and then how do I take advantage of the return when it comes?
Sure. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Gary. Obviously very insightful. There's a lot of notes that you shared with me that we just did not get time to share with everyone. So Sherry will have some information to send out to everyone who's attended and to our clients out there as well.